on to Principles and Practice of Procurement. We are on the fifth unit, that is Securing Quality Supplies and Competitive Prices. Section 1, the link between costs and prices. In this section, we are going to look at the link between cost and prices by studying each of the elements which makes up cost, as well as how to utilize this information we've obtained to make purchasing decisions. So by the end of this section, we should be able to understand the supplier's cost base, direct and indirect costs, fixed and variable costs, and how a buyer can use this kind of supplier cost information in making decisions. Understanding the supplier's cost base. There are three major areas in which a manufacturing business can incur costs. The first area is the raw materials, which constitutes the input to the manufacturing process. We can also have other materials like the components, the sub-assemblies, and consumables. The second area is labor, that's the wages or salaries of workers employed by the organization. The third area, which is overhead, this is the expenditure which we cannot directly identify with the output of a particular production item, but is associated with keeping business processes up and running. So from your principles of accounting, you were taught overhead costs, which are costs the organization cannot directly associate with the product. When you see the product, you don't see such items on the product, but without these costs, these overheads, we may not have been able to produce our outputs, the final products that we are sending to our customers. As we have examples of overheads to be electricity cost, the maintenance, office expenses and management cost. We have marketing, advertising, storage and transportation. These are all costs that cannot be directly identified with a particular product or with the output, but then they are costs which were needed to be incurred in order for our production to be successful. Another common way of classifying our costs is to distinguish between direct and indirect costs, which costs are directly associated with a particular output, which costs are not. So direct costs are costs which can be identified with a specific syllable unit of output. The cost we see directly when we see the particular output. So for example, the direct cost of producing an exercise book or a textbook will include direct materials such as the paper, the ink, and the glue, as well as direct labor, which is the wages paid to the employees working on the production of the books. So when you see a book, when you see your textbooks, you see the paper, you see writers, which definitely came from ink. You see glue, it was the glue that we used to put it together. Definitely you know that it was someone or people came together to put this book together. So these are the costs we can directly associate with the output. However, indirect costs are the expenditure on labor, materials, and other items which cannot be identified with a specific unit of output. So for example, the indirect material cost of a textbook will include oil used to lubricate the printing press, and the indirect labor cost will include salaries of staff supervisor and the sales staff. When I take the book, I don't care whether the materials used in producing the books were maintained or not. I don't even know if such a thing happened. When I see this textbook, I don't see supervisors standing on workers to put it together, supervising their works. I don't see the sales staff. So when you see this book, when you see the textbook, you're not able to identify or associate such costs directly with the books. These are what we refer to as the indirect costs. So direct costs are costs that can be associated with a particular output directly. When you see the book or you see the output, you know the cost. And the indirect costs are the costs you cannot identify with a specific output. We also have fixed and variable costs. Fixed costs are costs that do not vary at all as the volume of sales or production increases. So if an organization employs someone to pay the person, let's say 3,000 cedis daily, at the end of the period, at the end of the day, whether we produce or not, I'm receiving my 3,000. The organization is going to pay me this fixed sum. Whether we produce 100 units more, we produce 100 units less, whether we don't produce at all, whatever we do, this person is receiving this fixed amount. Or let's say rent. We have rented let's say a warehouse, At the end of the period, if the rent is say 5,000 cedis, and then whether you produce or not, you're paying 5,000 cedis for rent, whether the warehouse was used or not, you're going to pay that fixed sum. So the fixed costs are costs that do not vary as the unit or volume of production increases or falls. We don't care. It is fixed no matter what happens. Then variable costs are costs that varies as the volume of sales or production changes. Now that we understand our suppliers' cost base, as well as how they classify their costs, we've already established that they have the raw materials, the components, sub-assemblies or consumables. They also have the labor costs, the costs associated with overheads, their direct and indirect costs, as well as the fixed and variable costs. How are the buying organization going to use this kind of supplier cost information in making their purchasing decisions? The problem with cost analysis is that it is done by their suppliers, who may well be reluctant to share the information. So as a supplier, definitely it's going to be hard to tell my buyers at the end of the period, this is how much profit I make, this is what goes into my cost, this and this is what I incur, and this is what I do. However, if the buyer can ascertain the supplier's cost structure, the information will be useful in negotiating prices. So if I know this is how much profit you make at the end of the period, then I will know how to go about my negotiation. I know whether I'm being cheated or not. The buyer can use this information to assess whether the level of profit targeted by the supplier is excessive. If it is, there is scope for price reduction. The buying organization can also use this information to estimate the level of sales the supplier must achieve in order to break even. At the end of the day, we don't want our suppliers to run losses or even go bankrupt, as this may even have an impact on our organization. So having this kind of information will help us know the level of sales the supplier must achieve in order to break even or make profit, so that we know how to approach negotiation and how to make certain purchasing decisions, right? We can also use this information to compare the level of profit targeted by the supplier with that earned by their competitors. We can also use this information to estimate how valuable the business or contract will be to the supplier in terms of profitability. From the supply preferencing model, you know that the level of profit you contribute to, or the impact your purchase will have on your supplier's profitability, will influence your supplier's decision as to whether to work with you or not. So acquiring this information will help you know how valuable your business, the buying organization's business, is to the suppliers, which will inform how you approach your suppliers and the kind of negotiation power or bargaining power you have. We can also use this kind of information to estimate the lowest possible price the supplier can afford to charge. Remember, we don't want our suppliers to run losses or to go bankrupt. As part of being sustainable, we are using our power fairly, so we know the lowest possible price the supplier can take, so that we don't go below that price. We don't want to force our suppliers to do anything they will not like or anything that will be detrimental to the success of their organizations. By way of summary, we have looked at the link between cost and prices by understanding the supplier's cost base, direct and indirect cost, as well as fixed and variable cost. We also discussed how a buyer may use cost information on a supplier to secure quality supplies at competitive prices. Thank you.